A quick training on using Lemlist for cold outbound in the context of account-based marketing in otherwise enterprise deals, right? The way we use Lemlist is, as I said, account-based marketing. We're doing it for cold outreach. We find the emails and LinkedIn's. Sometimes we call them, usually we just do LinkedIn and email. And, well, we reach contacts that way, right? What is important to realize is we don't actually want to reach companies many times, but rather we want to do something called account-based marketing. I was actually just reading this article by Lucia, and I think they're an AI list building platform, right? So they have billion point, they're like Clay, like Apollo, like all of these other tools. A little overlap with what Lemlist does as well, to be honest. And they have this one case study. Well, okay. I'm being rate limited. Crazy. They have this one case study of Cardo, which is a company in the geospatial industry as well. And they started using this tool, which basically, it could be any tool, to be honest, it doesn't really matter too much. And, I'm being fucking rate limited again. Anyhow, 3 times more outbound leads. Now, they are doing account-based marketing. That's the reason they went 3x. The interesting part about the case study and about Cardo in general is, well, for one, they're in geospatial, which is our industry that we focus on as well. They sell a GIS product, and, well, they switched from doing generic cold outbound to account-based marketing. So rather than just doing volume and focusing on volume only, they started focusing on, I believe it was 400 companies, and then all the decision makers at those companies. So let's say there's 3 decision makers at each company, there's 1,200 leads. Not that many, actually. So, well, maybe it's even more than 3 per company, but you can imagine 400 companies is not a lot, at least for most people who do outbound. The interesting part about the fact they started focusing on account-based marketing rather than cold outbound, volume-based, let's say, is, well, the fact that they went 3x in their outbound leads. And they don't even do outbound primarily. They actually put 70% of their effort into inbound leads, which I think is about upselling, reselling, and cross-selling, which actually makes a lot of sense, because where do you want to start if you want to generate revenue? Well, the customers that have already paid you something, because those are going to be most likely to pay you more. So that's a great way to start, because, well, they already trust you, they like you. You don't have to convince them about as much as you would have to convince somebody who is completely cold. But 30% goes into cold outbound. In other words, new leads, new contacts, new companies. That didn't really amount to anything, and they did have those 400 companies they wanted to reach as well, and they did reach to an extent, but it just didn't really amount to as many leads, or as many companies, or as many demos rather, until they actually started doing account-based marketing. Now, what is account-based marketing? They are reaching these accounts over a long time span, reaching multiple decision makers in multiple different ways, that being both LinkedIn and email, but also being messaging that is tied to this decision maker, because the C-levels are going to have different interests than the engineers or than other sales or business development people, for that matter. So the people that they're reaching are probably governments, probably city planning, probably environmental agencies, probably real estate companies, depending on which verticals that they're attacking, right? And by using account-based marketing, they were reaching these companies and saw a much higher success rate, 3x. Simply because they switched from reaching as many people as possible to reaching a set of companies they actually want to reach and convert in a very personalized way, where the C-levels actually saw a message that was like, hey, indeed, I do want to increase my profit margins. And then the, let's say, engineers to see like, hey, maybe I should discuss whatever with my C-level, that being the prospects, right? And I thought that was very interesting. Now, besides, I'm still being rate limited. I have no clue why. The tool really made it much easier for them to find leads and find verified emails, which means it's cheaper. And the ROI went up as well. But well, to be honest, the tool is only $20 a month or something, $30 a month depending on how many credits you use. So the most interesting part about it is not really the tool. We use Lemlist. You can use Lucia. You can use other tools, but it's really about the strategy. The way you can track ABM or account-based marketing, the best way we found is either you just use a Google Sheet and you just input all the companies you want to reach, then find a couple of decision makers at each of those companies, you reach them, and you track the exact dates that you're reaching them. That is what we've seen work very well in the insurance space for one of our clients, where we book like one major reinsurer or insurer or finance department pretty much every week. And that's actually not even on full volume at the moment. So that's awesome. But we're using Lemlist and a little bit of manual outreach as well. What is interesting is the tracking. The fact that you're tracking dates rather than have I reached out to this person, yes or no, and on which channel, which you also do with ABM to be honest, but you're tracking when you've reached them. They will tell you maybe if they do reply when an RFI or RFP is coming up, and you know when to check in again, or you get an automated reply, you know when to check in again because they say we're back in office at this and this point. And you're always top of mind, considered for these RFPs and RFIs, both from a direct sales perspective, but also on an RFP's perspective, right? So not only are you reaching people, you're also thinking about when they want to buy, because a lot of these enterprises, they only buy at very specific moments when they are going to go through a tendering or procurement process again. That's why account-based marketing is the way to go whenever you're indeed going to sell to this enterprise segment, which is what most geospatial companies do or should be doing. Now, that being said, we use Lemlist, so let me quickly make this into a training from here. The way that we do this is, for one, we have an ABM tracker where I do what I just described. We track dates, we track the next check-in dates, we track multiple decision makers at one company. But we also need to verify these people and we need to find these people, right? Because we can search for, let's say, COOs at real estate companies. But if I go into the people database in Lemlist, which is where I can find people, I can do that, right? I can try and find real estate managers in Germany, for example. But I'll find a lot of like companies that aren't necessarily qualified or that are just going to basically be a waste of time. So let's say, this is what I do. I say real estate manager in Germany. I'm probably going to find a lot of people. Awesome. 1.6 million. Well, just to have it said. To be honest, that is keywords and profiles though, so not all of them are actually real estate managers. But you can imagine, clearly this is not the right way to go about it because you don't want to reach 1.6 billion people, right? There's just no point. But what we can do is we can, actually seeing a few leads that might be interesting, ironically, to one of our clients right here. So let me get back on this sometime soon. We can go about it the other way around. Let's say we still focus on Germany, right? Let's say we don't search for the job title, but rather we search for the company, and we can just input a set of companies. I saw Deloitte, for example. Let's say we want Deloitte as a client. Usually what you want as a client is the big engineering firms, the big consulting firms, right? At least if you're in the geospatial industry. If you're in engineering as well, you want to just work with bigger engineering firms. or you want to work with the ultimate end user, which is usually the public service, which is the government. So you can go about it that way as well, because you can actually search for organizations here. Now we actually have Deloitte, and now I can look through Deloitte, the 11,000 people that work for Deloitte in Germany, and I can try and find people who are, for example, in real estate. So still, this is 11,000 people, which is already much less. And yes, truthfully, it's going to take a little more time to build this list, but it's also going to take less time to actually reach the people, meaning it's going to be more productive. Obviously, there's more ways in which you can filter, which I would recommend you use as well. But if you go about it this way, you don't necessarily have to even know what the job title of the person is, but rather you just find the person. Because a lot of companies, they have different ways in which they structure their company. So you'll try and find for a C-level or like a chief operational officer, so COO, for example. But some companies, they don't have COOs, but rather they have a director of operations, operations manager, senior operations, whatever. Right? They have, or maybe they have the German term for it. And that means it's going to be messy to actually try and find COOs, because maybe Deloitte doesn't have a COO because they simply have a different job title for that. So that's interesting to think about. I think these people might be related actually, and that's also interesting. Anyhow, let me see, real estate manager, or let's just say real estate, because I don't think Deloitte is going to have real estate managers. So now I can go to Deloitte, I can search for keywords in a profile that have to do with real estate, meaning I'm going to know that, for one, the company is at least qualified, and two, that the person is going to be interested in real estate. If, for example, I'm trying to find somebody to sell my real estate management or asset management solution to. As you can see, now we have 236 people, which is still arguably quite a lot, but you can see we have a consultant real estate. I can check this person and I can push them into a campaign, or I can just copy the LinkedIn URL and bring it to the ABM tracker, which I'm not a fan of doing it that manual, but you can do that. And yeah, you can just scroll through this and you can find more people that will have different job titles, truthfully, to do with real estate. Senior manager real estate, and also a teacher, as you can see. You'll find, let's see if we can find more, auditor, consultant, business tax. Well, I'll find if people are qualified or if they are a decision maker, and I can find them that way. That way I'm kind of reverse engineering who the decision maker is, because I can try and reach somebody and I can think that they're the decision maker, because they will say senior consultant or senior director, but maybe there's somebody else who's even higher level or has even more leverage in the organization when it comes to software solutions. I'll be able to find, like, hey, there's multiple people at this company with multiple roles. Like here, the head of real estate actually. And excuse me, I don't actually have the pay plan on this particular client label. But well, I think you can kind of understand so far what this is looking like, right? So that's what is interesting. Honestly, in terms of when you do look for job titles at big organizations, you might just want to look into what are the previous clients we've worked with, what were their job titles. It's usually going to be similar. Or you can just, you can reverse engineer it the way I did right now, and you can look into who is working with the competitor, who is like their main person, because you can usually find it out. You usually know your prospect, they work with a competitor or an in-house team, and you can find out, okay, who's the contact person between those, connecting those organizations, right? Who's the middleman? If there's a middleman, or rather who's the department leader that is actually contacting the external organization that is in charge of making the decisions. You can reverse engineer that. But this is a great way to do it as well, because here I can just find 10 or 20 people who might be in charge. Because usually I can try and reach one of them. They might not be the person in charge. Because if I even scroll through this, right, there's I don't know how many people in charge of being a director. And it's like, well, I can try and reach all of them and I'll probably find the right person. I can try and insert a contact form on their website, but I'll probably have to find the person. I'll probably have to reverse engineer it this way. Anyhow, well, this is how we use Lemlist for list building and how we do that in the context of account-based marketing. We will reach somebody, we'll reach somebody else the next week and somebody else the next week. And then 2 months down the line, we've maybe reached everybody and we've actually sent them something of value, obviously, like a case study and an insight or whatever it may be. And then we go into following up or sending the next message, because maybe at that point we have an event that we're going to, and we will want to ask them if they're there as well, or we want to invite them to our event. We want to send them another case study or another blog post, another resource or some information, some insight into the industry, meaning they'll have more will to actually get on a call with you than if you were to follow up like 5 times in a week with the same person. It's just going to be annoying. So this is how we go about that. And another thing you can now be aware of as well is that the outreach is going to be multi-threaded. So if you do reach somebody who you deemed to be the decision maker, but they turn out not to be, you have the right appointment setting flow to be able to tell or give them a case study so that they can discuss it with somebody internally and then follow up later down the line again, or at least be top of mind in an RFP if they don't want to get on the call right away. So either you get on the call later because the person you reached is now referring you to somebody else into the organization and being like your being the gatekeeper in an extent, but also being your messenger essentially. Or you can be top of mind in the RFP, which is, or an RFI if there's one, which also means that, well, at least you're considered, right? So you're written down by somebody internally. That being said, there's so much churn within organizations, you will have to reach these people multiple times in the year. Like, don't just reach out to, let's say if I was to export 10 interesting people from this list, I can reach out to each of them every year, but chances are I need to be top of mind more often than just once a year. I need to be top of mind 4 times, 5 times a year, 6 times a year maybe even, depending on how fast the industry is. Because chances are half of those people don't work there anymore next year, and there's another 10 people that replace them, or there's other people that I need to be in charge with, which is also a bad thing, but also a good thing at the same time, because now maybe they work at an even bigger organization or a different organization that you can also convert because you already have the LinkedIn conversation with them. So cool, that might be a lot of information right there, but this is for the initial cold outreach and how you can do that. Whenever I do want to, let's say, select 2 people, let's say I select these 2 for no particular reason in this case, I can find their entire LinkedIn profile for free actually. You can see this person has actually been working at Deloitte for not that long, and chances are they'll be gone next year because, as you can see, this person doesn't work anywhere for very long. No shade to Thomas, by the way. I can click here and I can actually open his LinkedIn account, so I can reach him for free because technically this Lemlist account, as you saw, I haven't even upgraded to the pay plan just yet. We will, but I haven't done that just yet. We have more workspaces for different clients there. But yeah, that's kind of it in terms of LinkedIn. So we can already reach people manually and find them this way. But if I'm really smart, and I like to think I am, I can actually find their email too. And I can also push them to a campaign. So let's say these 2 people I want to push to a campaign. I've already created 2 campaigns in this case. So I can push them into there and I can find their email, or I can say I want to find their phone number, or I'll just keep it LinkedIn only and then I don't have to verify any type of email or phone number. LinkedIn has the best reply rate, like 5 times, 10 times better than cold email. Phone works in like construction and business to business. With governments, it works. I wouldn't recommend against it, but you need to be a little more careful because they usually don't like the fact that you have their phone number. If you even get it through this, by the way, because Lemlist doesn't find every single phone number or every single email, but it finds most of them. because truthfully, all of these Deloitte people are going to have more or less the same email address structure. So yeah, it's going to be pretty easy to find their email. Or they've made this database using AI and using multiple sources on the websites of Deloitte and all these other companies to find those emails. So you can usually kind of, or well, Lemlist has done this for you, but it reverse engineered what their email is. So I can push these into a campaign and find their emails. It will charge some credits. You get a few credits for free, but obviously you want to get the pay plan. And then you get a lot of credits, a lot more of them. You can push them into a campaign, then you know their email. You can then also export that and put it into a different tracker if you like, or you can use Lemlist's integrations to integrate this with a CRM or a different tool that you might be using, like Pipedrive, HubSpot, Airtable. I think you can use N8N with it, and there's one more interesting one. Well, Salesforce, obviously, and let me think. Well, there's one more, but whatever. There's many integrations, and I think you can even use APIs. So essentially, you can integrate it with everything. What we want to do from here is, well, if we've pushed these leads into a campaign, we can create a campaign, or maybe we've already created a campaign where we can figure out how we want to reach them. We can essentially automate sending them invites and chat messages if they do accept the invite. So if you create like a very large campaign, you can essentially automate that fully. And then at least the first 2 steps are automated, which is already great, because then you can create a list of 200 people and you don't have to think about even sending them a message manually, because you've already set up the automation to do that. And you can insert an email follow-up with that. So that's awesome. A good start already. And all of these messages you can obviously customize fully. And what I would recommend here, if you are going to do this, I would usually try and do most of this manual, because in the geospatial industry, especially if you're targeting multiple job titles and multiple organizations, multiple reasons that people will be using your solution, really, they have different incentives. But if you have a campaign with a lot of people that are more or less the same and have the same incentives, have the same pain points, you can do something like this. You work the top of funnel, so what you need to realize is these people, you can pitch them your solution and what your company does, but they won't really care until you've actually found a pain point that all of these people experience. In this case, what's your team's average time to complete a 3D model? We've been creating models in less than 48 hours. This is just an example I grabbed from a template, by the way. This way you can actually make them problem aware and then pitch the solution, right? I like this part. I don't really like this part, to be honest, but it can be this simple, actually. And in the LinkedIn chat message, in this case, it's empty still. But you can do the same thing. I think that makes sense for the most part. You can also add personalization. So AI variables, first name, last name. I mean, I think this is relatively simple. Not sure what Icebreaker even does, but for the most part, you understand what you can do here. And then also there's liquid syntax, where you can also be a little more customized with the actual messaging. But honestly, I wouldn't make it much more complicated than this. There's not really a point. What I would recommend is a proper signature, where you also include your link to your website, so that they can actually check out your website, see if you're legit. Because a lot of companies will do this. I personally do this whenever somebody reaches out to me. I want to check their website first, truthfully, 9 times out of 10. So I would recommend doing that. And then also, don't just say, this is what a lot of cold email people do. They will just put like their name only. Don't just put your name only. Put like name, job title, company, address, email, phone number. Like put all of that, even if it's for a client, put all of that, so that they know you're a legit business and they can get in contact with you in the way that they prefer. And also maybe address and everything, because maybe if they're close to the company, then it makes sense for them to even book a live meeting or to hop on to an event, right? And the website is also going to have case studies and such, so I would recommend having a good website for the most part. I mean, I think that's obvious, which also has all case studies that would be relevant for cold outreach. so that people have a reason to even get on a call with you. Other than just the fact that you have worked with other brands, there should also be a clear value proposition. In other words, you can do something faster, cheaper, or better. That being said, I think that's most about the campaigns. Once you've done this, you can also create a lead list. So you can go about this two ways, lead list first or campaign like sequence first. And then once you've done that, you can also launch the campaign and everything will run from there. Obviously, you do need to have your email connected and you need to have your LinkedIn account connected, but I think that's clear so far. In the dashboard, it will then show all of the hot leads, so people have opened the email or LinkedIn message, who have accepted an invite, who have visited your profile, etc. You'll find all of that here. This is actually a client we just started with, so we don't have that just yet. Inbox will have all of the conversations in one place, so everything that happened through Lemlist will be in this inbox. And tasks, if you add manual tasks like calling, you can automate calling. I mean, you can automate calling, but I would recommend against it for the most part. If you're doing cold calls, unless it's inbound calls, that's different. You can use AI for that. But yeah, those are going to show up here whenever you have added particular steps you wanted to do manual in LinkedIn. Because truthfully, the first message, it can be more repetitive or used across different people. But then the rest of the conversational flow, you can kind of script it a little bit, but there's going to be customization involved. So truthfully, I would do that part manual. So the first message can be, well, slightly manual or slightly automated, or you can try both. The rest of the conversation is just, you need humans, right? Like you need actual people to handle those conversations, to be able to book them on calls. We have Lemlist VoIP, which is where you can actually connect your dialer and use VoIP so that you can actually call through Lemlist, which is pretty nice. And reports, which is going to show which campaigns are performing best, as well as templates, which you can use for creating campaigns, right? People database I've just shown. Contacts is the ones that you've actually verified. So these are some test records that we used. And then companies are companies as well. Which again, I think this makes sense. These are just companies from people who have been in a campaign, or you added them into a campaign, or the people who work there have been added into a campaign. So you see how that works. And this way you can also look into one. Let's say we grab the African Development Bank Group. We can check all of the contacts that we have at that company, which means we're actually keeping track of account-based marketing once again. That being said, notifications, credits, I think all of that also makes sense. Connecting your account, we've documented that in SOPs, but it's not really hard to do. And you can also obviously invite colleagues. You can also add multiple people into one workspace. We currently have a couple of workspaces that we use for clients. Billing. Well, I would recommend get the multi-channel expert plan and just get one account at least connected to it. If you're doing multiple labels or multiple products or multiple solutions that are unrelated, you might want to split them. If they're related, you can use one workspace because you want to use those contacts throughout the different solutions, if that makes sense. If you have a software offer, you're not going to do separate outreach or have a separate lead list for the consulting offer that might be sold on top of that, because, well, you get what I'm saying. Like the upsells, cross-sells and stuff you can keep in the same workspace. If it's actually different target audiences, different products, different solutions, create different workspaces and have different SDRs for it maybe as well. That's all in terms of Lemlist and account-based marketing. The reason I'm big on using ABM or account-based marketing as a strategy as well, I've shown at the beginning of the video, is success rates just much higher, but also productivity and the fact you actually focus on enterprise only. A lot of companies, they'll do outreach or even inbound, get inbound leads from smaller companies, and they'll essentially hardly qualify them. Even if they are realistically able to land enterprise clients, they put their effort and their engineering capacity into smaller deal sizes. It's just a way to burn your business to the ground, really. So I would recommend against that. But that being said, it can be a strategy if you do need to get proof. If you have already gotten a couple of clients before, just focus on enterprise only, really. Especially using account-based marketing, because it's just a better way of doing business, really. Like bigger deal sizes, bigger profit margins, better retention, and well, easier in terms of outreach, because now you can focus more so on up, cross, and reselling rather than having to gain new clients every single week, right? So I think that's a better approach. That being said, you can do that. It depends on what your offer kind of is. In terms of Lemlist, they also have a couple of other tools, Lemwarm, Lemcall, but that part doesn't really matter, to be honest. I mean, yes, you do need to make sure that your email capacity is warmed up. You're not just spamming, but this only matters as soon as your volume goes like through the roof. A calendar, well, you can use Calendly, you can use any other type of calendar. We actually have an SOP for appointment setting. So let's say we get interest from people, or they give us an objection. We have a couple of messages that we use for objection handling. To be honest, we use more or less the same messaging across clients for that part, because all of them are selling a software solution or a consulting offer, meaning the objections are more or less the same, and the way to handle them is more or less the same. And we found that it works well. So once you get interest, whether that be a positive or a neutral reply, or a slightly negative reply maybe even, at least you can make sure that you're top of mind in the RFP at the worst case scenario. Or in the best case scenario, you can flip the script and get them on a discovery call anyways. Or if they are positive or neutral, well, you make sure you don't actually drop them, and you actually make sure that you book them in, it's pretty simple of a process, but you just need the right messaging, especially if you're high in volume. That being said, this is most of Lemlist, most of what matters for account-based marketing. There is a strategy part that comes in front of doing ABM as well, since you'll have to map out organizations, use cases and roles, and then also the incentives every single job title and or type of organization has in using your solution. Sometimes that's pretty straightforward, you just have one vertical. Sometimes it's not as straightforward, so you need to document it very well. For the most part, you learn that as you go as well, to be honest, to improve that, but for the most part it's pretty straightforward, except it's not really easy to do it well, at least for most people. Because your segmentation, there's so many ways in which you can segment. Targeting, there's multiple ways in which you can target, which there's right and wrong ways. And then positioning, which is mainly your messaging and your pricing, to be honest, and your website and your previous case studies and proof. Those are really the main pillars to build a strategy or go-to-market strategy around. And they're easy to do, but you need a little bit of reference material to do it properly. You need a little bit of marketing theory to do that properly as well. That being said, I hope this has been a valuable video. I'll actually use this internally and probably put it on YouTube as well, so that for the most part it's clear internally on how to use Lemlist. And then, well, if people can get some value out of this video, that's great as well. If you're interested on how we help geospatial companies, software companies, engineering firms in lead generation, we can get on a call. You can actually go to locatics.io. We are obviously a business development agency helping companies like that. We usually target the enterprise segment. We do account-based marketing. We also support with the adjacent work like SEO, website development, conversion rate optimization on there, the entire rest of the sales process, because lead generation is just one step. And then tenders and RFPs as well, which is a whole different ballgame, but I hope that's been an interesting video and that's useful. If you're interested in those services or the adjacent services as well, book a call at locatics.io. Or if you're already working with locatics.io, I hope this has been a valuable video for you as well. I appreciate you for watching the video and see you in another one. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to subscribe as well.